Hello and welcome to Down to Watch, the podcast that asks, are you down to watch? I'm your host, Kahmeela. If you're a horror fan and an avid Letterboxd participant, you may be familiar with this week's guest. The Hooptober challenge on Letterboxd was his brainchild, and it started way back in 2013. He created the horror movie viewing project that asks participants to watch 31 films in 31 days, but those films have their caveats. Today is Halloween, so let's welcome this episode's guest, David Hood, aka the Cinemonster.
Hey Camille, how you doing today?
Good, how are you?
Doing pretty well.
On this All Hallows Eve, Halloween, which just so happens to be, it's my favorite holiday. Is it yours?
Absolutely. It has no ties to any kind of institutionalized religion. It has no familial obligations. It's really the day of the year, at least from a holiday standpoint, where you get judged the least. So it's a great day all around. What's not to like about it? And you get to eat candy, and if you're of age, you get to probably drink a little bit too much too.
Yes, it's all very exciting. We're going out trick-or-treating tonight, taking my daughter, and this will be the first time that I just realized, like, she's 5 now, and then I realized I can probably have a little whiskey in my mug this year. It'll be okay.
What's she going to be?
She is going to be a unicorn, a rainbow unicorn, to be specific. This is something that she thought up. I asked her what she wanted to be like back in the summer, and this is what she said. This is what she's stuck with, and that's going to be her thingy. And my husband and I will have T-shirts. Yeah, we have T-shirts that say unicorn security.
Yeah.
Because
Somebody, if you're going to have a unicorn out in the wild, somebody needs to have some responsibility over them.
Exactly, because you just never know. You never know what you're going to get depending upon, like, unicorns. They make their own rules, and they just cannot be contained.
Absolutely.
So unicorns aside, and, celebrating Halloween and whatnot, what was the first horror movie you watched?
The first one that I remember watching was James Whale's Frankenstein. I was somewhere probably right around 5, just based on context clues from my memory. So 5, give or take a little bit. I used to have this habit when I woke up in the middle of the night, I would sneak into our den, and back when you had UHF stations and people actually watched a real physical television.
The giant floor model TV.
It was wooden console. It had no remote control. Yes. It's the best kind. You had to get up. You were invested. If you had to get up and change it to something else, you had an investment in whatever that something else was now.
Yes.
But I turned it on and changed to a station, and it was Frankenstein. It was somewhere, the film had already started, and I saw the monster on screen, and I just kind of stuck to it, and I watched it the rest of the night, and it scared the shit out of me. It was a couple of weeks before I wasn't keeping the lights on at night, before I wasn't making some kind of stuffed animal pillow fort around me to keep monsters away. My parents would get up in the middle of the night, yell at me about why the hell the lights were on in the hallway, and I couldn't tell them because that would screw up my whole TV viewing when I would wake up overnight. So it was tough. I just had to take the abuse and take the anger so I could keep getting up and watching stuff at night.
So you did that on a regular basis, just got up in the middle of the night and went and...
Yeah. I was one of those kids who just wake up in the middle of the night. I used to wander around. I'd just wander around the house, or I'd go out in the yard or something. And one day I just turned the TV on. And once I ran into something that was cool, I just started putting the TV on.
That's amazing. And but also, 5, that's really young to experience that by yourself in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Hence the stuffy pillow forts. Your guard stuffies.
In much the same way that you and your partner will look out for the unicorn tonight, there was at least 2 Curious Georges that used to look out for me when I slept.
Oh, bless his heart. Curious George. Always there, just right there in a pinch.
Absolutely.
So clearly this was like kind of a traumatic experience for you at that time. So not to say, but it was enough for you to be like, I want to see more. Like, I want to, like, when did you start to be, when was the horror fan born?
Well, I had a half brother that lived with us for a little bit. He was about 10 years older than I was. And I confided in him that I watched this. And he told me that there was other monster movies. And
he
rattling them off. I'm like, what is this shit? What are you talking about? So I went to something else that you would do back then, a place that was called a library. It was full of books.
Oh my goodness gracious!
That people would go to pretty frequently.
Back in olden times, back in my day.
and I went to the part of the library that was meant for people my size, and I asked the woman there, whose name I don't remember anymore, and she said sure, and she said that they had monster books, and there were these thin little volumes that had as a front cover a black and white still from all the Universal horror films, and then the back cover was orange, and it was maybe 30 pages, something like that. So I grabbed every single solitary one of them, and I made a little note, and I would look through the TV guide, and I would look for those things. Because I get another thing, TV guide. It used to be this thing you'd keep in your house to see what was going to be on the television. So it was pretty easy to flip through there and try to look for this stuff. So I had that was the making of my very first film list. Was that?
You're doing research, man.
That was my first film list. Yeah.
I appreciate. I'm assuming you and I are of the same age, like around about like Gen X and whatnot. So all of this stuff, I'm right there with you, man. Like I was seeing all of that stuff. Did you ever, while you were in the library and whatnot, did you ever like come across like the very scary stories to tell in the dark? Those volumes. Do you remember those books?
Did, but what kind of pulled me the quickest was probably by about 6 or 7. Maybe by 7, I knew who Alfred Hitchcock was.
Yes.
And he was ubiquitous in the children's section. I got hooked on Alfred Hitchcock and the Three Investigators. There's Alfred Hitchcock Presents Scary Stories.
I used to get the vinyl albums from the library for Alfred Hitchcock telling the stories.
One of his TV shows was still on UHF at the time. So then I got hooked on Alfred Hitchcock, and I learned he was a director. So I would tell other kids who gave no shit at all that Alfred Hitchcock was my favorite director.
That's where I was too.
And about a year later, all my friends learned who Steven Spielberg was, and that became their favorite director, even though they had no concept of that prior. But it was still Hitchcock for me. Yeah,
I was probably like, I don't know, maybe 3rd or 4th grade when I discovered Alfred Hitchcock, and it was on the Nick at Night. Where it was I think it was Nick at Night, where Alfred Hitchcock Presents would be on there, and I would stay up and watch them. And my mom would let me watch that. And then I would listen to those stories on the vinyl records. And so to this day, though, Hitchcock still remains on my top list of like horror stuff to go to.
Yeah, absolutely. One of those years, I think it was somewhere around 4th or 5th grade, for school, we had to sell like magazine subscriptions to raise money for something. I can't remember what the hell we were raising money for, like playground equipment or something really vital. But I remember flipping through it, and there was Alfred Hitchcock's Mystery Magazine. And I told my mom, I was like, I need this. Not only do I need this, you'll be helping whatever piece of crap we're going to build behind our elementary school. So you're helping the school, and you're giving this to me at the same time. So she broke down, and I got Alfred Hitchcock's Mystery Magazine, and I just ate that stuff up I think it was 10 issues. It wasn't 12. It was 10 for 12 months, and I would just eat those things up when they'd show up. Another thing that doesn't happen anymore, I would stare at the mailbox, and I became interested in the mail all of a sudden. So if I knew it was around the time it should be coming, I'd open the damn mailbox every day.
That's adorable.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, it's just bills and crap. I don't need this.
Nobody cares.
Which I still say. It's like, oh, it's just bills and crap. I don't need this.
Right. Now, boring. Nobody cares. So are you a filmmaker as well? Do you create?
Not really. When I was younger, I did some things. I did some content on High 8 and some other things when I was younger. I grew up doing some Super 8 stuff. But no, it's not something I've really done in a while. There was a sponsor for my pop-up theater in Pittsburgh that, oddly enough, right before I left Pittsburgh, he talked about maybe doing something. But I'm moving. Oh man, it's gonna be too hard for me. I tried to get a narrative film off the ground in the 90s. I even went so far as I had a meeting with the then head of the Texas Film Commission, Tom Copeland, and went back and forth about a few things and thought I had money for it. But when that kind of fell out, you reach a certain point in life where the bills get larger and the commitments get larger, and you need to spend more time doing something that's addressing those bills. So it's kind of faded away, but
it fucking sucks, man. Why? I just want to be independently wealthy so I can do all my hobbies and things that I just want to do. I don't want to I don't want to work for the man. So
I mean, I picture a retirement where I'm in some kind of complex where I have access to a camera and I just make all the other old freaking half senile and half mentally broken down people. I make them do things. I dress them up and make my own little films with them. So, I mean,
I tell you right now, the Gen X old nursing homes and retirement communities are going to be lit. There's going to be an amazing place to be.
Somebody's going to put on the wrong song and everybody's going to injure themselves at the same time because we cannot move anymore.
Because somebody's trying to back that thing up, and then we're supposed to anymore. The doctor has told you are no longer allowed to back that thing up.
Yeah, Cameo's going to come on and I'm going to blow out both my hips.
Not word up. Okay.
Oh, man down, not word up.
So you're from Texas and came to Pittsburgh, or you're from Pittsburgh and went to Texas?
I grew up in Texas. I was born in LA, but I grew up in Texas. I've been here since I was pretty young. Frankenstein was the last real good memory I have from California. We moved to Texas right after Frankenstein. So
okay.
And then I was here until I came to Pittsburgh, which was back in early 2016. And I was out there for almost exactly 8 years.
Yeah, and it's crazy to me that our paths never crossed until right before you're getting ready to leave.
COVID.
Which is nonsense.
COVID gutted everything. There was a lot that was going on in my industry. There was a lot that I was starting to get involved in right before COVID. And COVID just, you blinked and 2 years were gone.
Yeah. Fucking hell. Okay, so since you are, Texas boy, this year's project is named for the entire project is named for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre director, Tobe Hooper.
Correct.
Why him? Why for?
Well, I grew up here and I went to school here, and for pretty much almost the entirety of my 20s and most of my 30s, I lived in Austin. And at the time that I came up here, any of us that were from a certain little subsect of film fans somebody would know where the Chainsaw Massacre house was. So you'd make a little pilgrimage out there. Somebody knew where the gas station was, so you'd make a little pilgrimage out there. And it's just, I was having this conversation with somebody a couple of years ago. I always connected with Tobe and I always connected with George growing up, which made me a little bit of an outlier in my peer group of film fans when I was growing up, because I didn't have the same love for The Thing when I was growing up that they did. Okay. I didn't have the same love for Big Trouble in Little China as they did. And although I liked Wes Craven a lot, and The Hills Have Eyes is one of my favorite horror films, I just gravitated towards George and Tobe a lot. So when you're young and you like something different and you get into an argument with people about things, you really double down, especially if your opinion is on the outside. So that could drive you down the road to learning more, watching more, experiencing more. And that was my relationship with Tobe and my relationship with George. The fact that Tobe was also from Texas, went to the University of Texas, just kind of, it was local. There's resources around me. It just felt right. You're also more attached to things that are from where you are and things that are from your home. So and I just loved everything he did. One of my earliest memories of really being scared after Frankenstein was watching Salem's Lot on TV. That's still scary as hell. And that was my first exposure to Tobe. That's the first thing I saw of Tobe's was Salem's Lot. And that was terrifying. That was absolutely terrifying.
I don't think I've ever actually watched Salem's Lot. And I think I've been meaning to this year because of the remake they've done, or there's like something on Paramount. But I don't know why. It's just one of those things that just never got to, because I think I kind of got into the horror world on purpose later in life, because I was very much in a household of like, no, you can't watch, vampires, zombies, that kind of thing. That's just of the devil. Let's leave it alone. And so anytime I would watch that stuff, I would have to be outside of the house or like try to sneak and watch it and blah, blah, blah. So I missed a lot of the classic 80s and 90s stuff, or probably early 90s. But I don't think I saw a vampire movie until I think The Lost Boys was probably the first one that I saw, and that was probably not until like 1990, 91, something like that.
Gotcha.
But so yeah, still playing catch up on some of the old school horror films.
And then after Salem's Lot, Poltergeist was just a huge cultural thing when I was a kid, when that came out in school. Then you had to go to a theater. So anything that we weren't old enough to go see and to get in just became that much more interesting. And that just became some kind of quest to figure out what theater had it showing in what house that we could possibly sneak into and try to go see it. So yeah, Poltergeist was just tore through school. I mean, there's kids in it. I mean, that was early on in that cycle of kids being up front in 80s films. I mean, that was 1982. So it was before we got to a lot of the more friendly, more fuzzy stuff. A little bit of it was out, but it was before your Goonies and before your Stand By Me and before your Monster Squad and all that stuff. So it really put kids at the forefront, and that really resonated too, because you're stepping into the shoes of the protagonist, and the protagonist is you, which I think is why Salem's Lot probably connected with me a little bit too. That was my favorite Stephen King book when I was a kid, but you're essentially your two leads that you're following. One is a grown man, and the other one's a kid. And it's easy to latch on to kid when you were a kid. So.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't often when we saw ourselves as children, like quote unquote, reflected in film, outside of an animated tale or something, a never-ending story or something of that nature,
or a terrible live-action Disney film.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, so what are the rules of Hooptober?
They change every year. There's always going to be X number of decades that you have to do. It didn't hit me until I realized how long I'd been doing this. I think it used to be 6 decades, something like that, until I realized that I'd been doing this over 3 decades. I've crossed over 3 decades. So 6 didn't really push it back quite as far as I would have liked. So I made it 8 decades after that, because I started in, I guess 2 decades, the teens and the 20s now. So 2 could be the teens and the 20s. You could then do the aughts and the 90s, and you were 2/3 of the way there. So I extended it to 8 because I really want to push people back to 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and not just do 80s forward. So that's always going to be a requirement. So is a number of countries, which I think I grew a couple of years ago. I grew it by an extra country. But in addition to that, I try to push people towards, I mean, everything kind of comes from either what's being released that year, or it comes from news headlines, which there's some speculation sometime in the comments from a few people of where I get some of them from. And the speculation is always related to films in some way, shape, or form. But more often than not, it's coming from the news. So if you look at it that way, and you look over the last 5 or 6 years, you'll probably figure out where some of that stuff came from.
So probably some infectious diseases happening around 2020.
People getting studying infectious diseases, issues with civil rights. That's been a big part of things for me. Discrimination against a certain group may have really flared up one year. So if you look through that lens and you go back, that's where a lot of it comes from. So
that's really interesting to to view it through that scope. This year's theme is Texas, or
what's that?
This year's theme is it's titled Hooptober 11, the return to Texas because we need that extra push over the cliff.
Yeah, I mean, one, I returned to Texas. 2, obviously that's a quote from This Is Spinal Tap. You know, the amps that go to 11.
Yes.
So that's where that quote's from. It's like when you need that extra push. But I mean, honestly, it's kind of tongue in cheek too about an extra push over a cliff, just generally. So
yeah. So you've been doing this on Letterboxd for 11 years.
Yes.
Did this start somewhere else? Were you just doing this amongst friends before, or at movie theaters for programming or anything like that?
No, it started there. In the earlier days of Letterboxd, there was a ton of interaction. It wasn't a lot of people. So, and a lot of the people who were on were new to it. I mean, there wasn't really anything quite like that. So people spend a lot of time on it because of the excitement of some of the features and some of the things you can do and some of the people you can interact with. I think the first person I followed on there was Roger Avery back whenever the hell that was, 2012, something like that. But so a lot of us would do different things to engage with one another in some way, or we try to make some kind of challenge or some kind of way that you had to make a list that vexed you or was a giant pain in your ass. So I'd done a couple of challenge-like things that actually had a fair amount of traction that a decent amount of people did that became involved in. And we had, for lack of a better term, there was like friend groups on there who would interact quite a bit. So I figured one year, I know there's different horror things out there. Most of us weren't in our 20s. Most of us were at least up in our 30s. Some people that were on at that time were in their 40s and beyond and had kids and mortgages and 2 jobs. And I was thinking it's so hard to do 31 films in 31 days when you have kids, when you have puppies, when you have 2 jobs, commutes, when you have, a broken furnace. It's hard to It's hard to do all that crap. So the first one, I started it on September 15th, which gave everybody 46 days to watch 31 films. And it was a little bit self-serving too, because I had just moved and I had like a backlog of stuff I'd bought that I hadn't watched yet, as often happens with those of us that buy films.
Right.
And it was also the same year that the full restoration of Texas Chainsaw was done. The film was completely restored that first year. So I was sitting there and I was just looking at it and I was thinking about things that we'd done. I'm like, I'll just throw this out there. I mean, I'd like to watch some things. I'd like to clear this pile out. I still think on the Mount Rushmore of American horror films, especially in the last half of the 20th century, I think Tobe's still fourth. I think he still doesn't get the respect and the recognition that he deserves, which is probably best illustrated by the assholes that claim that Spielberg directed Poltergeist. So I just kind of piecemealed that together the way you would when you open up your fridge and say, I got a bunch of food here. I got to make something with this shit. So that was my horror stew that year. And I just put it together and more people got involved than I expected did. And I'd done other things before, so I didn't really think anything of it. We did that. It was fun. And then it was like the next year, probably somewhere in July, I got a message from somebody that said, hey, is Hooptober going to be the same as it was last year? Or is there going to be like different rules and different things? And I'm like, I don't know, man. I wasn't really anticipating doing this. And then I heard from somebody else that said, hey, is it going to start on the same day this year? Or is it going to be the same thing? And then I heard from another person. And I just said like out loud to nobody, I'm like, I guess I'm going to do another one of these things.
And it's good. You built like a little community.
Yeah, it's fun. I like that. Probably somewhere around this, in between the first and the second one, there was a lot of negative and a lot of just nasty shit that was popping up on Letterboxd. It was around the time that a lot of the same was happening in the gaming community, especially around women, where there was just a lot of just vitriol against their participation, God forbid, in something that they weren't invited to.
Right.
So I decided to just keep doing it and just kind of keep an eye on it and hope that it would continue to be something that we can do as a group that would be positive, that the interactions would be positive. And 99.9% of them have been. I've been able to slide out a person or two that wasn't. But yeah, that's what led. I think it was two might have been the first one where you had to do at least 1 or 2 films directed by a woman. And that was when the whole gamer bullshit with the backlash against women really blew up. So that's why that one was in there. For those like to speculate on why I put some of the things in that I do. But yeah, and it just kind of kept going from there. It doesn't feel like an obligation necessarily, but I feel like, okay, have to do this. Got to get up and do the Hooptobers. Got to take my shower and put on my hat and do my Hooptobers. So, but it's great. I get personal pleasure out of. I mean, now there's like people that started doing it when they were in high school who are now like out of college and married.
Yikes.
And they've either found a love for horror, or they have said, wow, there's great horror films in Mexico, or I saw some films from Poland or from India this year, or I didn't realize that Black people in America had made horror films and started horror films for quite a long time, and where that horror comes from and why that horror is the way it is. I mean, it's silly to say that, but, that's not what's up at the forefront in front of people all the time. So it's nice just to kind of navigate things through, because I believe firmly that I think we make more informed decisions, and I think we look at each other in a very different way. The more experiences that we can have with one another, the more experiences we can have with others' art, the more things that we can see, I think puts things in a very different context. And I think it makes the things that we experience from that point in life more enriching and more thoughtful, or at least it has the ability to do that. And I think that's very important. And certainly wasn't what my idea was day one, but it became that way kind of quickly, and it's kind of been pervasive in the decade since.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I enjoy. Like, I have never been able to finish a challenge, but I do appreciate the fact that you've got so many like outliers there, and just all these different subgenres within the genre of horror, and then like decades and countries and different directors and whatnot, because it does help to expand your viewpoint, as well as just like, what you're consuming as a horror aficionado. Because you can't, sometimes you get stuck, obviously, and then not necessarily on your own fault, but just like, nobody, I would never have thought to be like, you know what, maybe I should check out to see what kind of, horror is going on in Argentina. And that's just not really, just because it's not necessarily just right there in your face available. You gotta search for it.
And that comes from different places. So for some people, maybe that leads you down a different road. What does this represent? Where does it come from? Is it because of the Spanish Civil War? Was it during the time of an oppressive dictatorship? I mean, a lot of these things come about for a lot of different reasons. And for some, it's just the exposure and enjoyment of the film. And for others, maybe it piques an interest in looking into the country a little bit more.
Yeah. Has there been anything that sticks out, a film that surprised you, that you just like, that while you were doing this, while you're making this up, that, this is something that I found a new favorite kind of thing? Or do you already know what you're going to watch when you go into this every year?
I don't always. Probably. I mean, there's some things that I know I hadn't seen that were out there that I did watch because of this, and I loved, like The Girl with All the Gifts. But I was aware of that film from its release. I was aware of it as a book. So probably my favorite discovery that wasn't something I initially had any clue about when I started doing this, but watched, I can't remember what year it was German Chainsaw Massacre. I was not aware that film existed. I had no idea of the director and his art background or his oeuvre. I had no idea that he had, that there had been a screening of his films at the Museum of Modern Art in New York at one point. I had no earthly idea. And Udo Kier's in it, and I had never heard of it. And I love
Udo Kier.
Oh, did you? This is just another feather in his weird career cap.
Nice.
100%. Yeah, so that was probably things that I had no exposure to or was not aware of. That was my favorite experience watching, was German Chainsaw Massacre. It's usually streaming somewhere. It pops up every once in a while, and there is a really nice DVD set with that film and some of his short films on it, but it's absolutely worth watching. It's not too long. It's like an hour and 15 minutes. It's not very long, hour and 20 minutes. So about as long as the Universal horror film. So it's not a long time commitment, but it is batshit crazy. It is absolutely insane. And it's consistent with Udo Kier and his decisions sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, that is yes, he's a unique little man. Mm-hmm. All right. Has there been a year that you haven't been able to complete your own list?
Oh, there's been several. I was just talking. There's somebody I'm partnering with here locally, and when we were talking a couple weeks ago, I told her I call it the curse of Hooptober. Something happens to me in September, October every freaking year. The very first year I did it, we were moving into an old house, and I was doing most of the utilities, and my not quite wife at the time was going to set up internet, and she forgot. And when she got it set up, it was going to be 9 days before they could get internet installed in our house for whatever reason. So Hooptober started, and I had no internet for 9 days. I mean, I had some discs I could watch, but a lot of the stuff that I was going to watch was going to be stuff that was streaming. So it's kind of
so you're like stuck to DVDs like some sort of caveman. Like, what the hell?
Exactly. And next thing I know, people are going to come over and just act out things in front of me by firelight. But it's been something every year. And not when I curse, I don't necessarily mean a negative thing. Like my honeymoon was in the middle of Hooptober. My wedding was at the beginning of Hooptober. My separation was during Hooptober. I bought a house and moved into a house in the middle of Hooptober, and that was a big. So there's been something every year that's just timing wise is eating away a week or 2 weeks at least of Hooptober every year. So I know something's going to happen every year. It just seems
were you able to complete it this year, or
no?
Did something get in the way?
I have not. So I'm going to cram a ton in today. And then I'm going to the Draft House tonight to see Carpenter's Halloween to kind of cap it off. So I haven't seen that in the theater. I don't think in a long time. So.
All right. So all this talk of lists, movie lists, and all of the themes and yada yada. Let's bring it to what I do love is a good movie marathon, and what always lends itself easily and well to those movie marathons are franchises, horror franchises. And I've asked you, David, to bring in your list of your 3 favorite horror movie franchises. And I've also compiled my favorite 3 horror franchises.
Sure.
Would you like to share?
Yeah.
Share with the class?
It's a good year for that. I mean, you probably know that horror franchise was the backbone of this year's Hooptober. You had to watch a complete horror franchise with at least 4 entries. So.
Yes, this is one of the reasons why I chose this as well.
Very good. I mean, it kind of, for me, it begins and it ends with Romero's Dead quadrilogy. That's the beginning. Oh, wow. That's the beginning and the end for me. 4 has its issues, but there's still some great ideas there. 3 has grown on me over the years. I know 3 has tons of fans, but in real time as a kid, with how much I loved Night and how much I loved Dawn, Day was a little nasty for a young kid and a little bit of a letdown at the time, even though I thought the effects were fantastic. But it's definitely grown on me. And then Night and Dawn are just 2 of my at worst 5 favorite horror films. Maybe 2 of my 4 favorite, but at the very worst 2 of my 5 favorite.
Okay.
I love Night. Night was always shown on TV because it was in public domain. So every single solitary UHF station would show it. Even like Fox early on when Fox was starting for programming, Fox would show it too. So it was always everywhere. So, and they would put out colorized versions of it and all sorts of stupid things. So I saw it so much, and it's still so chilling. It's still so grim. The fact that all the blood when the daughter is killing the mother is just this oil colored stuff that's just splattering on the wall. It's really disturbing. I
think it's, in some senses, a lot of times, I guess if done properly, like the blood and gore in black and white films is a little more traumatizing than in color.
I think so too. It's something about it being red and seeing it in full color the way it's usually done. There's something almost cartoonish about it.
Right.
But that's absent in black and white for sure. And then the end just guts you. The end of Night just absolutely gutting.
And
then Dawn's just this great spectacle. And I saw it when I was young and back when a mall was a thing. Again, we're getting back to when things were things. Well, malls were a thing. I can hear my joints creaking. Sorry. But that was very immediate. Because when we were kids, we went to malls. So there's something very immediate about that. Even if we didn't understand the consumerism aspects of what George was putting forth, you understood other things on a different level. And as you get older, you started to understand more things about it. But that would be.
And that's the beauty of a lot of these films too. Is like, I don't know, basis, you find them as a child, and you get like this stuff. I'm scared.
Yeah.
These are scary images. I see them, and like the older we get, the more we watch them, then we start to understand the layers underneath it, and like what's really, we're pulling back the onion layers, and we're understanding it's like, oh, this is on social construct, and this is commentary on racial inequality. Yeah. So yeah, that's another beauty of horror.
Absolutely, it's the best that do it. Just dress up fantastic messages for people who just want to experience it as escapism, but there's also something there for those that want to really look at what's being said. And to your point, whether it's something about social inequality or the AIDS epidemic or the crack epidemic. I mean, there's a lot of stuff throughout the 80s and the early 90s, obviously, that addresses a lot of those things.
Yeah,
but. Yeah, that's what makes horror the best. So for me, number one is Romero's Dead quadrilogy. Right. And for you, number one, or do we? I shouldn't have started at the top. Maybe I should have done a countdown from the bottom.
That's fine. Oh, we'll do it this way. And I'm sorry, like mine might be a little pedestrian, compared to whatever your list is going to be. But my number one is the Saw franchise.
Nothing wrong with that.
I remember seeing that, like, they're not all by any means, masterpiece theater. Like, it's probably like maybe 3 or 4 of them, and I'm just like, mwah, yes, chef's kiss. Mm-hmm. But I am dedicated to this franchise to the point of it's like every time one comes out in the theater, yes, my butt is in that seat. I'm going to go watch it. It started with the first one, like very low budget. 20 years ago now, I think this is the 20-year anniversary for it. And I saw it in the theater, and I just remember like that big fucking reveal at the end just like scared the shit out of me. And I was just like shook. I'm like I am wrapped up into myself in my theater seat. And it's very few theater experiences that I have that compare to that to this day. And so that has always stuck with me. And I'm also like a really big Carrie Elway's fan, which is why I went to see it in the first place. And I was also just very impressed by what was done, for how much it was done with, and, like what the guys like Lee Winnell and James Wan, what their story was as filmmakers, young filmmakers, and just how they were able to make that happen. I see the next one because I am a Gen X woman, and Donnie Wahlberg, my boy band husband, was in that one. So that's why I went on to the second one.
Everybody had one of the New Kids on the Block.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, it just kept on going, far and on after that. And again, like, and I thought that there was going to be like a definitive, like, I think it was like 7 was like, or 6. Saw 6, they were like, okay, this is the final thing, this is it, wrap it up. And they had a nice little box set, DVD box set, and I bought it, and I was like, yes, this is it. And then like 2 years later, I was like, hey, by the way, guys, we're gonna bring out another one. And I was mostly upset because I had bought the box set.
Yeah, it's about as reliable as, hey guys, this is gonna be our very last tour, we're never touring again. It's pretty much the same mess. And you're like, no, I've been fooled. Fool me once. Not right.
And also Tobin Bell, like he brings so much to the role of Jigsaw, of John Kramer, and I think he's a phenomenal actor, and he's done very well for himself with this role. So, yep.
What's most impressive to me about that franchise was, for the longest time, they cranked one out every October. They got one done every single solitary year. Yep. And it was just like clockwork. What is it? It's October. Oh, that means just the next Saw film is coming out. And that's not easy to do.
No.
Especially as they grew in scale. I mean, it's one thing to obviously, to do the smaller one and to get that out for a date. But now you're on the clock with more money and more responsibility towards somebody who's giving you money, and being able to get that thing done and get it done in less than a year and get it out. That's not easy.
Right.
That was pretty impressive.
Your number 2?
My number 2, I'm going to ask you this. So for Hooptober this year, I put as a qualifier for franchises that it was at least 4 entries. Is that what I'm being held to today also? At least 4 entries?
No, I go with 3.
Okay.
Maybe at least 3 entries.
Okay, then it's Evil Dead.
Oh, okay.
And it's Evil Dead. Not a weak one of the bunch. Each one really has its own identity and its own uniqueness. The first one's certainly a little bit more of a straight up horror film. The second one leans more into comedy and has some just fantastic effects, has some fantastic practical effects. And then there's whatever the ridiculousness of the third one is. Where all of a sudden we're just transported in time. And it's,
right?
and it's honestly, it's the most quotable one too. It's the one where they just lean into Ash. You know, obviously Ash was the breakout of 2, and they just lean into that in the third one. So yeah, beginning to end, that's just fun. It's just
Bruce
fun.
Campbell really found his niche there. Like that was a sweet spot.
Yeah, and he's basically trafficked as Ash since then.
Right.
and made a good living. He could probably open up a Draft House franchise if he wanted to.
Exactly. Really lean into it.
Yeah.
My number 2 is Scream. It started off with, I saw the first one in the theater. It was ruined for me because before I saw it, somebody told me that there were 2 killers. So it wasn't like completely ruined, but it was enough to be like, come on, like I missed like a little bit of something there.
Yeah.
But it's Matthew Lillard. Like he's just the way like his character, Billy Loomis has his reasons for why what he did what he did, and it's like but Stu Macher was just there for the ride, and you see it along. Even when Billy's like, and your mom, was fucking my dad, and you see Stu's like, oh, really? That was the reason we were doing all this? I had no idea. I just thought it was fun. So, and I'm still to this day, I'm like hoping it's like bring Stu Macher back. Like I have conjured, I have thought it out, guys. I've figured it out. I've got a draft for you. Just talk to me.
So many others have come back. There's a way.
Exactly. They always bring somebody back. Somebody can come back. But like even when they had like the fourth one, I thought that was a far inferior film to the other ones, and for the longest time I was like ignoring it. I'm like, Scream is a trilogy. There is no fourth movie. I don't know what you're talking about. But like even now though, I kind of skip through it and we come back to the requels. Is that what we're calling them?
I don't know.
Reboots, whatever, the 2 newer ones. I thought it was going to be trash, but I really was pulled into because, I'm of the age of like, there's a bunch of kids in this movie I don't know and I don't care about. I don't know if I'm going to be able to connect with this at all. But Jenna Ortega and the other girl who plays her, I forget her name, who plays her sister, they did an excellent job. And even like their supporting cast around them, which one of the kids, which surprising to me, I found out was Cuba Gooding Jr.'s son. Like they all they're amazing. Like this one, it was done very well. And I love the aspect of the who done it throughout, like just trying to like guess every time, every turn, like who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? I don't think I've ever correctly guessed who the killer was, but that's part of the fun for me.
Yeah. The last one, it seemed like there was 6 people that between them were stabbed at least 45 times and none of them died.
Right.
I usually have, if I make some comments about a film I watch on Letterboxd, they used to be longer. Now they're kind of like capsules and I'll kind of touch on some things. But the only thing I could really think after I saw the last Scream, and I could not get my head away from this, is I just witnessed a film that had the most resilient people in the history of cinema.
Seriously.
100%. How those people lived is beyond me.
And it's also like another thing with me was always like, as many times as Ghostface would get hit in the face, get kicked around, get knocked over, like whoever in your group has bruised face, like you would think somebody would be walking around with like a busted lip or something. Like that's probably your dude. That's probably what you're doing with. And I think the second to last one that I just watched, where there's the 2 killers, spoilers. One of them is a taller dude. The other one is a small girl. And when we see Ghostface attacking Dewey, it's clear this person is taller than him, but it's supposed to be the girl. And it's just like, things like that. Like that just kind of sometimes takes me out of it a little bit. I'm just like, that is a very small girl. There's no way she's towering over Dewey or even being able to take him. It's just, it's too much.
There's short, stunt people out there. Somebody could have been cast who was smaller. They could have put that thing on.
Right. So yeah, but it's still enjoyable for me. Every Halloween, I rewatch it.
Mm-hmm. All right. So this brings us to third. Third was tough, and third comes down to what you think about one of these franchises. Third, I'm leaning towards either Phantasm or Nightmare on Elm Street, but
interesting.
One of the conversations I used to get into, but Jaws is pretty much accepted as being a horror film now. It used to be a little bit of an argument once upon a time, and Jaws is my favorite horror film. So if we can take the Jaws franchise, it might just eke out Nightmare and Phantasm for me.
Oh, wow.
Because Jaws is perfect. The first Jaws is absolutely perfect.
It is.
The second Jaws, I think if it existed without the first film, it's a fine little action film. It's fun. The third film is silly in a way that works for me. It's just goofy, and the 3D effects are just, I don't know, they're just cute. It's just cute. When I watch it, it's like me doing like a movie version of "Oh, Bless Your Heart," that kind of thing. And
like, oh, you tried.
Yeah.
You tried it.
And then the fourth one is just such a shit show, but in a way that I like it. You have a shark that's standing up on its tail, waiting to be impaled by a boat. You have Michael Caine, who's impervious to water. You have a shark that somehow has GPS on humans to know where they move to, so they can come track down and find you. And then you have Melvin Van Peebles, who's great. So I'm sorry, Mario Van Peebles.
Okay.
Excuse me. Who I love and who I think was always underutilized, and while not as brilliant as his dad, I think he's been a much better filmmaker than people give him credit for.
True story.
But he was great. He was a great screen presence, and you put all those things together, and just great. And
that's hilarious.
And the quote of Michael Caine, which I don't know verbatim, but essentially when he was asked about Jaws for the Revenge, she said that's what bought my beach house and wherever the hell it was. So I know
that's right.
So just all around, I like that. So Jaws might just squeak past Elm Street and Phantasm. I love three of the Elm Street films, and I'm kind of up and down with the other ones.
Did you like the remake of Elm Street?
No, it was awful. It was absolutely awful. Weird side note. I used to do a little bit of a list series, and these were always arguments that we had amongst friends for like the last 30 years. If something were to be remade, who would you want to remake it and who would star in it? And then it turned into like different eras and so forth. But it came up because a lot of things, it was somewhere in the 90s, a lot of stuff from like the 60s and early 70s was starting to get remade. And one of my two favorite films is Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. And I think there's certain films that you should not touch. You shouldn't remake Casablanca. I mean, you wouldn't remake Do the Right Thing. I mean, why the hell would you do any of those things? So this is probably mid-90s. And a friend of mine pressed me. He's like, well, what if somebody remade Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid? And I was like, well, I'd want to see something different. I sat there for a minute. And this was probably 1996. So it was a year after Devil in the Blue Dress came out. And I said, if Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid got remade, I would want to see Don Cheadle be Butch Cassidy, and I want to see Denzel Washington be the Sundance Kid. I was like, that, and Halle Berry would be the Catherine Ross part. I was like, that I might go see.
Interesting.
So this just became like a thing over the years. Well, if we did this, and we talked about being John Malkovich and recasting different things at different eras and stuff. And right after Get Out came out, I just had this thing in my head because the Nightmare remake is just god awful. It's terrible. I don't know if you saw it, but it's.
Oh, I did. I saw it exactly one time, and I just remember walking out there like, and I'm not even like a huge like Krueger fan or anything. Like I appreciate the originals and all that, and I know like, you know, Robert Englund is Freddy Krueger, but I'm like, whoever the fuck this guy was, like I don't know what he was doing, but this was just
Well, after I saw Get Out, I was thinking, I wonder what the hell Jordan Peele could do rewriting and rebooting A Nightmare on Elm Street. And what Mahershala Ali would be like is Freddy Krueger.
Oh my God.
And ever since I thought that, I cannot get that out of my head. I don't know what that would look like. I'm not the person to obviously speculate and flesh out what that would look like, but I'd love to see it. And
I bet Jordan Peele would do wonders with it. Mahershala. That's an interesting choice because you don't usually.
If you're going to do something different like that. Don't just change a couple of things about the origin or put in, something about Michael Myers when he was a kid. I mean, I appreciate that he did that, but have somebody who can come at it from a completely different direction, rethink it, and move it into something that could be compelling and interesting. And I think oftentimes, obviously, it's a capitalism-based decision most of the time, remakes, unfortunately. So you don't get that.
Yeah. That's a shame.
Yeah, unless it's like The Thing or something, you don't get that.
Right. Okay, so my third, and I know, like everybody knows that my favorite movie in general is Psycho, but I will not ever like. The franchise will never be on like it won't make it on even like a top 10 list for me. Just, I mean, they're fine, but I just cannot with most of them.
2 is good.
So 2 is good, but like the other ones, like it's just I just can't. So that said, my third is the Insidious franchise.
Really? Mm-hmm. I still haven't seen all that.
Really?
Yeah, I've seen some of it.
There's 4 of them. Mm-hmm. They are genuinely creepy as fuck to me. Mm-hmm. Just the whole of going to the other side, with the other side of the veil, or however that is, or your dream world or whatever, and they do a fantastic job of just giving you like hints of horror and creepy things on screen, or like if you've got your eye just like if you're looking at just the right spot, you'll see something, or if you're not looking there, you won't see it, you won't notice it. Like in the 4th one, there's a shot of like Patrick Wilson is in his car and he's sitting in a graveyard, I believe, but like if you're not paying attention, you won't notice that there's somebody in his back, like outside of his car, and they're getting like creepily closer and close, like it's just they're coming more and more into focus just slightly. So it's just like a lot of great camera work and just like the direction of them all and the effects. Yes, we have our typical jump scares with the loud music that accompanies that, but we also there are also times when it's like, oh my, that shit, I wasn't even expecting it. Or when like the wife in the first one they're like setting up the new house and she starts hearing that fucking Tiny Tim, that Tiptoe Through the Tulip song, and like there's like a little child giggle and pitter patter of feet. Like there's nothing more terrifying than inexplicable child laughter and a pitter patter of feet. Like there's no child supposed to be in your house and you're hearing that shit is fucking creepy, and you can't get away with it, or you can't get away from it. It's just like chills. So yeah. I really like the Insidious franchise, and they tell a good story. They're doing a really, to me it speaks of like generational trauma. Basically, is kind of like the underlying theme, in my opinion.
That's part of that wider cinematic universe that they were putting out. The Insidious is with The Conjuring and The Nun and all that stuff. Isn't that all? That's all.
Insidious isn't part of Conjuring. Like it's Patrick Wilson.
That's right.
But you're right. The Conjuring and The Nun and Annabelle, they're all together.
Yeah, I fell out of that because there was just so much of it. The way I just kind of fell out of the Marvel universe. There's too many interconnected things, and I kind of fell by the wayside. Some of the Insidious stuff I've already started putting on my list for next year because I saw the first one forever ago. And then I saw the second one in pieces, like over a week. It took me a week to watch it, not for reasons related to the film. And I'd like to go back and do that. So I'm figure out some way to put all of it on next year, maybe. But I definitely like to do the first couple. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, but only one Psycho. You don't acknowledge the other Psycho films.
Well, this like you said, the second one I can get down with. But there's like another one where I forget which one it is, but when he's like calling into a talk radio show, it's too much.
I feel so bad for him in the second one, and it's insane that they made you feel bad for this person,
right? Because like he's genuinely trying to get his shit together, trying to keep it together, and then we got fucking Meg Tilly and her mom like fucking him, like messing with him. Like that's not. I also feel bad for like just Anthony Perkins in general. You know, he was just very typecast after Psycho, after the success of that, and it was like not much else that Hollywood was willing to let him do.
Yeah, it was nice to see him kind of come back a little bit and be out in front. I mean, even if it's not, those films weren't of quality, I think you can tell he came from an era where it was where people in Hollywood enjoyed the notoriety, enjoyed being out in front of people. You go on talk shows. It just part of the lifestyle was being out in front. And you always heard there's always horror stories back from that era of people that would kind of fall out of that spotlight in their lives, just awful things, you know, just awful stories about people who came out of that. So you can see, I think he kind of, even though you can read that he wasn't super thrilled with everything that he was doing at the time, when you see him in the 80s on talk shows and giving interviews and being brought out as this star from Psycho, and you know him as Norman Bates, you can see he liked it. Yeah, he was relishing it. He enjoyed being up front again, and that was really nice. Is, you know, again, somebody who disappeared from the spotlight for a while, somebody that had to live a life publicly that wasn't consistent with the life that he had privately was, I'm sure, incredibly difficult. So it was nice to see him in his later years be out in the front again, at least get some spotlight.
Yeah, it really was. Norman Bates. Well, thank you, David, for talking to me about horror and stuff for this time period. Like, this was fun. I really enjoyed it.
Anytime. I had to move away in order to work with you, so
yeah.
Counterintuitive, but
yeah, it's a little ridiculous, but you know, whatevs. If you ever find yourself back in Pittsburgh for an extended period of time, or if I come down there to Austin, which I'm hoping to do before you come back to Pittsburgh, then we'll get together. Down to Watch is a Rugged Angel production. You can find it wherever you enjoy your podcasts. Please subscribe, rate, and spread the word. For more Rugged Angel podcasts, visit ruggedangel.com. Thanks so much.